so that we can share this with other people who maybe weren't here. And I'm going to take it from there. So thank you again, everybody, for taking the time out to be here. As I was saying, I just really, we came together as a team and said, we're supporting all these leaders. And, you know, as many of you know, our vision at Instincts at Work is leading leaders in system transformation. So here's the rubber hitting the road. We are here to support you and lead you in whatever way we can to just support the excellent work that you're doing. And we wanted to start this off with our tribe. So you are all people who are familiar with our program, who've been through the program. What we would say and what we've seen is that you have skills already. You've been practicing prior to needing them quite so much. You've been practicing these skills for leading in complexity. And so we see you as kind of pivotal leaders for what is going on, because you really have an understanding in a different way. And so we just really, really honor you. We just really feel privileged to work with you, and we want to support you in whatever way, because this is the transformation. This is what you've been preparing for. And so for tonight, what we want to do is just take you through a few strategies. We want to record this and then also get your ideas about what else we could do to support you, or how we collectively might support others as we work together through this crisis time. Okay, so I'm going to just start my screen here and take you into our presentation.
One phone not on mute. If Rita, would you mind muting yourself just to keep the quality?
Oh, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
thought I was on mute. Sorry.
Thanks,
Well, that's okay. Good. Excellent. So let's just start from here. So, okay. So we titled this 3 things you can do as a leader in this crisis to support your people. We know as leaders, you're always thinking about that. You're always thinking about your people before you're thinking about yourself. We're going to try to give you a little bit of encouragement there as well. So we want to give you some of those strategies, but also have you think about supporting you, because it all starts with you. So we wanted to have this virtual community of support because frankly, we just think you're all the bomb. We just think you're the coolest things. And we just thought getting you together was a great opportunity to start to create some of that support, especially as people are really under the gun. So that's really what today's about. So I wanted to start with a little question. So I want you to reflect on what's the one thing you'd like to take away from this webinar that would help you the most right now. So just take a moment and reflect. And if you could use the chat function at the bottom, just put something in about what you're thinking about that you think would be the most helpful for you right now that we might be able to help with. Okay, so I'm getting from Rachel, there's no breaks in the day. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. How to adjust and stay focused on the important things. So how to manage your focus, that's sort of a key piece that you're thinking about.
Supporting staff and directors through nonstop changes. Yes, bit verging on chaos here for sure. Turning down and ignoring the fire hose of messages to focus on the big picture. Yep. That's good. Maintaining things focus when things are chaotic. Strategies for reassuring doctors as we measure everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
How to work through frequently changing information while looking after the team and operations.
Okay, super.
Which is great.
How to unplug. Good one. That's what we're here to do tonight, to do a bit of learning, but think about unplugging a little bit too. Awesome. Okay. Good. Reassure everybody. Super. Okay. So let's luckily that I think what we've designed for you today addresses that. So it shows that we are kind of hearing from you and aligned with you in certain ways, because these are some of the topics that we're discussing today. So what we've planned for you is that we want you to leave the call feeling calmer, more focused, and more supported really in the challenges that you face. And so for tonight's webinar, we want you to learn 3 strategies to decrease your and others' threat response. And we're naming our 3 strategies hand and amygdala washing. Thought we'd put a little funny twist on what you're doing a lot in a day to try to help you with your focus and with managing the chaos. We're going to be talking about how to normalize and empathize, and then how to increase certainty through effective communication. Okay, so that's our plan for today. I also wanted to say that we are very open to having this be a regular kind of a drop-in thing for the interns. So for the next few Thursdays, having an opportunity, we want to support you, we want to reconnect. So we will also want you to keep in mind if there are any other strategies, or maybe we won't get to everything today. We'll go back over the chat, but please feel free to put in suggestions or things that you feel like you want specific help with from us. Okay. So let's move this forward. You've probably seen this quote, but we thought it was a good one to place us. Everything we do before a pandemic will seem alarmist, and everything we do after a pandemic will seem inadequate. This is the dilemma we face, but it should not stop us from doing what we can to prepare. We need to reach out to everyone with words that inform, but not inflame. We need to encourage everyone to prepare, but not panic. And so this is the line that you're all walking. And what I would say with this, our tribe, our group, is that you have done the work that we feel is so important to prepare yourself. You've actually done the preparation work, but you've done preparation work in terms of your leadership and your thinking, which we're seeing more and more as people are facing this crisis. That's part of where people are struggling a lot. So, you know, again, you've learned about results in relationship, how we get focused on the task. You're seeing a lot of that, but really as leaders, it becomes super important how you focus your attention and you help other people focus. Okay, so why is the threat level so high? Let's hear from you. What are you experiencing with that? Why do you think the threat level is so high?
Feel free to pop those answers in the chat if you don't want to.
Yeah, pop them in the chat. Okay. A lot of uncertainty. Feeling powerlessness, fear, unknown, unsure of the answers, yes. Multiple sources of information, yeah, personal security, not knowing what will happen. Understanding potential gravity, what's our role? Are we waiting? The impact is high. Too many messages. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? Yeah, excellent. So when we go back to thinking about our model, oh yeah, hearing stories from other countries. So there's all this information going, there's a global shift going on, there's all this information. Let's just think about what we know about the brain and threat response. So when we start off, when there's threat, we can have threat in our external environment, but it might be like initially back in January, there was threat going on in China, and we were like, okay, that's going to be bad. Those of you who've been through SARS or know about pandemic planning or all the rest of it, we're like, okay, this is going to hit. But there was some distance around it. Then it started to move into the community, right? And so then it started coming up against our country, our province, our communities. We've been hearing things about, you know, people who are in Barrie and in Stratford, Huron, Perth area, all of these things. It starts to get local. And so that proximity increases the threat. And then we get to the point where some of the threats are not just in terms of physical health, but we have multiple threats on many fronts. So we're not just looking at health, we are looking at also financial. We're looking at community structures. So there's threat in various domains, but there's also proximity of threat. And so this is an unprecedented level of threat because it's not just in one domain, it's many domains, and those domains amplify each other. And so this is causing threat really everywhere. It's hard for people to escape. They're thinking about security, their finances, their pensions, or their whatever, in addition to health factors, in addition to what's going on with their family. And in all of this, we have this level of uncertainty. Okay, so this is why our brains are sort of on high gear. So we know, back to what we've learned in terms of the model and our approach avoid state, people are in this threat state. They're in high level threat, and there's all these scarf variables that are showing up for people. So interestingly, we're having this conversation as a team and saying what we find is that, and I don't know, I'd be interesting to hear in the chat your comments about this. There's a lot of focus on certainty or uncertainty. There's a lot of focus on autonomy. What am I supposed to do? Can I act? Who directs? What's going on? And there's also threats or concern around relatedness, certainly as people go into quarantine or isolation, teams working virtually, people are losing some of that relatedness or some of that sense of connection. Less so it seems to be as much of a concern about status. It seems like this was a variable, and it made me actually question the role of status, where, people were much more concerned before with, do I look good? Who has power in this situation? But as we move from complexity into chaos, some of these status markers and that concern breaks down. People want leadership. They need direction to restore certainty. But some of that piece around status seems to be falling away. And just curious what you're noticing about that. So in the chat, is that something you've seen in terms of status?
Yeah, we're hearing from Ron and Aaron that they've both seen some interesting status threats. So if you want to pop some details into the chat, that'd be great.
I was just going to go.
Yeah, go ahead, talk.
With the speaking, because it's easier to talk than
sure, go ahead.
Chat. But what I've seen is people who are feeling left out of the war room. Trying to are feeling that they're not as important as like the people who are right in the middle of the planning. They want to be in there, and they're wondering why they haven't been in that, as deep into it, why they've kind of been left out. I've also been seeing it in terms of like kind of on the other side, where we've heard some of our some people are saying, well, they think that they're less important because they weren't decanted as early out of the offices, right? So they feel that there's a lesser level of importance or value for them to the rest of the organization. So it's just there have been some really interesting things that I've personally noticed with people feeling, left out or less than.
Right. Interesting. Excellent.
Can I make a comment about autonomy? And it's just been interesting to me because I think typically we're always trying to honor people's autonomy, right? And be sensitive to that. And I almost feel like it's been the experience a little bit that's been reversed. So we've had some providers that maybe thought we would tell them what to do in this state, where we don't do that. I mean, that's not how we operate. And so that's been interesting for me, like having that come at you in the opposite way than what we're used to, right?
Yes. And as we go over that, I think it'll be really helpful for you guys to ground yourselves again in the idea about the complexity model, right? Because Cynefin actually tells us why that's happening.
Right.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because there'll be a mix, right?
Pardon me?
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because I think we might have some people, like individuals, who actually would feel more comfortable if they were given more direction, and others will not be.
Yes.
But how do you know which you're talking to? Right?
That's a great question. And I think we're actually going to address that. So let's go into that a little bit deeper. So of course, back to the brain science of what you all know, where people are in this, back to the, kind of original coin term by Goleman around amygdala hijack, like people are in a hijack state, right? So what we really need you to remember this visual, because what is really important to remember here is that as people get sort of taken over with that emotional threat response, the available ability to think through things at a higher level is diminished, right? It's really, really important for you and for others to recognize this. We begin to see where people have trouble processing. I don't know if you're finding, but your ability probably to make decisions at the end of the day is markedly down. You're getting tapped faster. You're making so many quick, complex decisions. You're trying to manage that. And so your ability to actually hold that really diminishes much more quickly because of the range of threats that you're experiencing and that you're walking into on a daily basis, right? And so we begin to see where people get more reactive, they get more, I would say, automatic in their responses to things, or they might default to earlier things. You might say, oh, I can't believe I reacted like that. I thought I was over that, but I kind of reacted in a way that I used to, and I'm not happy about that. You might see, exactly like you're describing, other people being more reactive. So we go into a bit of that avoid state. Okay, so that's a function of that. So it's really important to remember that, because while the brain is in that threat state, we are going to think more concretely, more about what's in front of us. We want more simple solutions that are concrete, and it's harder for us to think in more complex ways. Okay, so one of the strategies that we use for that, you all know clearing the space, but we're going to actually go through it right now because we want you to experience it again. Okay, so we want to actually experience this. So from the work of Eisenberger and Lieberman, they did a lot of work on this idea about when we label an emotion without going into the detail. So we label it and we consciously think about moving it to the side. We go from this state of fogginess that's sort of happening when we're in that threat state to more clarity. It actually dampens down the threat response, okay? So what we're trying to do is to actually use that strategy in a regular way. It's a simple thing to do. It's a very simple strategy, but it's been, again, the evidence shows this is very effective. So this is something you can do yourself throughout the day. This is something you can do with your team, but it really just consists of that idea about emotional distancing. Renee, did you want to say something about the use of this tool?
Yeah, well, I think that we're just talking about it, how we want to label, back to labeling the emotions, putting it together really just categorizes how you're feeling. And you can almost like, you can just see the emotions going, oh yeah, there's the anger. Oh yeah, there's the irritation. There's the sadness, whatever that is. And it just allows us to almost create space around, so that we can kind of just look at it. Still, either we could choose it or not choose it. And then, but ideally part of this exercise, as we all know, we've practiced it many times, is to then just go, okay, yeah, I'm going to actually put that aside, name it, and then put it aside, so then you can focus. And we talked about it as, we talked about amygdala washing, like, so when we're cleaning our hands, we think about, doing the practice of cleaning our hands, or we tell our staff, you got to clean your hands, or your patients. So we talked about it as a strategy. When we're cleaning our hands, we could actually do clearing the space at the same time. So you could, it's like a bundle practice, if you will. So you could kind of use that as an opportunity to say, okay, wow, like I'm feeling really, I haven't eaten in 8 hours. Like, what do I need to do right now? As you're cleaning your hands, you've got a solid 20, hopefully good 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds to do that. So that's just, again, it's something that we've talked about it, we all know, but it's just something we can sort of pair to what you do, and you can bring that into your team as well.
Amazing. So
can I add a comment?
Yes, please.
Just that I didn't consciously do this today, but in some ways I'm just reflecting because I had a conversation with my husband in the middle of the day, and I was just kind of annoyed about something, and I told him, right, because he just happened to call me. And I was like, oh, just, and then it was gone. Like, it really was.
Yes.
Because I just said it to him and he doesn't know what it was about, or he doesn't really care, right? Like what I was talking about.
Right.
But I said it just because it happened to be good timing to be like, right. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's a great example. And so we did this little visual for you to think about as you're washing your hands. That's like your little red amygdala threat kind of diminishing. You can also think about it as a COVID-19 virus taken off. So you're washing it off. So you're washing your amygdala at the same time you're washing your hands. So you're getting kind of a dual effect. So it's again that metacognitive ability where you're almost going into the map view and saying, what is actually going on right now? What do I need? We were talking about this idea about where's my attention? So just taking that moment when you're hand washing, where's my attention? Where do I want to bring my attention to? So just for a moment, let's all clear the space right now. So what we want you all to do is just take a minute and label the emotion that's in the space. And sometimes it's hard for people. People will say uncertainty. Well, uncertainty isn't an emotion. It's maybe a state that you're in where you're uncertain, but what's the feeling behind it? So it might be anxiety, it might be frustration. So everybody just take a moment without going into the story. We want you to label the emotion. If you want, share it in the chat. And then just everyone take a breath while you're doing that and just notice your breath in your body. Just take a breath in. And as you breathe out, think about clearing that emotion. You're just going to clear it to the side. You're going to breathe it out and clear it. And you're going to focus back on where you want your attention right now, which is that we're going to talk about some more strategies, some more things we can do. Okay. So just a very simple little routine that you can do while you're hand washing, your amygdala washing, pairing it. You can even combine it with taking a breath, but it's back to that embodiment, bringing you to the present, out of your head, and that labeling and containment. And so this is what we want to create. We want to create that dampening down of the response, and we want to ensure that you're able to think at a higher level. So the point that we were talking about there around this, the threat responses that, actually, before we go into this, how do you, let's just quickly reflect now, just take a minute because we cleared the space. So what's going on in your body now? Are you noticing anything different? Are you noticing any shifts? Are you noticing any shifts in how you're thinking? Are you noticing any shifts in your emotional space? Just take a moment and just think about that. Now that I cleared it, what's going on that's different? And share it if you feel like. Okay, so just pay attention to that. It might require a couple of breaths. It might require clearing it again. Sometimes when we have an elevated threat, it requires a little bit more to actually clear it. So again, this is a practice. Good, I'm not feeling my heart move. Maybe it kind of came down. And that's another, exercise, thinking about just a very simple thing about how you can de-stress. It's back to lowering your levels of cortisol, right? That response. Okay, so
Rita's saying less tension too, that you can feel the tension sort of draining
tension.
away.
Good. So you can have those micro moments. You may not have a lot of breaks. You might be running between things, but we know you're washing your hands. We know that maybe once or twice you're using the washroom. So you have a moment to kind of do that in the day and try to embed that a little bit more in a routine and a little habit.
And I just want to add to that too, is that, as Penny said, even if that time, that moment, whatever you choose, whether it's hand cleaning or not, that when you use that, clearing the space, but also in between, what I've experienced today was, just in between meetings, in between the hustle of having to do what the next thing is just even in that walking, almost like that walking meditation, like giving that moment from space to space when you're thinking about, oh yeah, I got to go to this meeting, but I didn't finish this up over here, is to really use that as an opportunity as well. Like what Penny said, from room to room or meeting to meeting. But I found that really helpful too. And you're literally in your body too. So it allows you to kind of ground a bit too.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Renee's our resident ICP, infection control person. So she's in the midst of it in a acute care setting in Toronto. So she goes back and forth between worlds. So she has a lot of time to tell us whether what we're doing is like total nonsense and it doesn't work, because she gets to test it out.
Judgment-free zone.
Good. Okay, so let's just revisit the CNAFN framework, because I think that this is a powerful framework for us to actually understand what's going on. So, you know, we've talked about this before, that in simpler times before January, even though we felt we were still in that complexity, you know, in simpler times we can sense, categorize, and respond. Things are more linear and they can be known. As they get into more of a complicated frame, there's more dynamics at play. So as we were looking at more integration, we were moving into that more that complicated, but again, that idea is that it is knowable. There is an expert who can tell us what to do. And many of us and many of your people, and Amber, you were alluding to this, that people are still looking for, what does the expert say? Who has the expertise? Now that is absolutely relevant to have that sense and look for that and try to get the best information we can. But as we move into complexity, there's a breakdown in linearity. It's really important to remember that. Our brains have a lot of challenge with that. The breakdown is such that we can't actually stitch one thing together to another. There's so many interacting variables. And so solutions become emergent. You're having to walk through things and you're having to try to figure out how to deal with things in the moment. So you're probing, you're sensing, you're responding. We've now actually tipped over the edge, frankly, into chaos, right? With the pandemic, now we're in this space of chaos. We were teetering on the edge before, but now we're full on into this. And so I think what's really important to recognize in that is that people don't see an association. Now, we don't know how everything is going to fit together. There is no sense of any relationship between things. Things seem random to us in some ways. And so this is obviously the most high level kind of stress experience. And so, you know, David Snowden, who developed the CNAFN model, has this expression where he says it's not a line between simple and chaotic, it's actually a cliff and people are going over it. And I think we're seeing that with leaders. People are trying to hold on to some semblance of, and we're going to get into the strategies, control, understanding things, but their capacity to actually deal with multiple priorities, multiple challenges, things that are not related and coming out of everywhere at all times, their ability to deal with that and their nervous system are not at the level to deal with that effectively. And so we see people really going through, you know, incredible strain and difficulty meeting those challenges. And this is one of the reasons why what you're pointing to too, we want you to really get this. As leaders, there are different kinds of leadership responses in each of these domains. When you're working in just a complicated system, people are revered for their expertise. The more expertise you have with things, people are like, yes, that's great. I want to know what the experts say, and you're an expert in this, and that's wonderful. As we move into complexity, it's much more about your ability to form coalitions and how you lead teams and how you distribute the leadership. When we're in a chaotic place, people are looking for direction. They want somebody who's decisive and acts. So Amber, this speaks very well to your point about, well, I don't do that. I'm the kind of person who builds teams. You've all worked to be those team builders and distributed leaders. And you want to know what other people think. Well, other people think that somebody should be telling them what to do. That's what they think right now. So what we want you to get from this is to not be unwilling to go there. It's not wrong to go there, to be more directive in this time. You have to match the strategy to where people are at. And some people you get really stuck in, well, I know this is the right way and I want to encourage everybody. But sometimes, and to your point, Erin, there might be status threats around this, but it's important that you keep people's brains in the same direction for the greater good. And sometimes as a leader, you're going to take flack for that. But you also have to be very, the importance here is clarity and helping people find direction. And so you might choose to go more into that, acting, directing, and then sense, okay, do I have people who are just fighting me because they need control? Or do I actually have somebody who's willing to contribute to this and have a conversation and they're actually able to think through and be a collaborator in thinking this through at a higher level, in which case you might move more into that distributed or complex way of thinking about it. Okay. So that's an important piece to notice about CANAF and where we're going in terms of that complexity. So I just want to make sure we get to these, then we can kind of digest it a bit more, but I just want to talk about the strategy. So what can you do as a leader? We talked about the hand and amygdala washing. We kind of went through that. Now we're going to talk about normalizing and empathizing, and also how you can increase certainty through your communication. So you'll all remember, I'm sure, this slide another slide we banged you over the head with, and this is why, we're hoping that it sticks for times like these. So leadership is always this move when we're working with people about this shift from safety to purpose, right? And when people get into reactive, we tend to see three kinds of behaviors: complying, protecting, controlling. And this is a function of how reactive they are. They're trying to keep themselves safe. So can you, for a minute, think about how people are showing up in this way to try to keep themselves safe? They're trying to keep themselves safe. They're trying to keep their loved ones safe. Really, from back to the concentric circles, just their own health and safety. So you might see more of these behaviors coming up. That's why we see a range. We see some people who are trying very, very hard to do the right thing, and I'm going to be super good. I'm almost going to burn myself out by trying to do everything exactly the right way that I'm supposed to do it. You're going to see people who are withdrawing. And we're going to go through these strategies or these responses, or people who are controlling. The move is, as a leader, even if you're going to be directive, and some of you, when we talked about our program, the EOP program, we got into this a little bit, but it's the concept of when somebody's triggered or they're in reactive, you sometimes have to be more directive with them. You've got to be more of that boss energy. This is what we're going to do, not in an unkind way or authoritarian way, but recognizing where people's thinking is falling when they're having trouble and they're highly reactive. So your job as a leader is to keep yourself as much as you can in this state. This state is infectious when you're in that creative mindset. It literally, there's some evidence that people will actually, they just sense this, and it calms them to see you be in this state. It calms them to know that you're relating, you're revealing, you're understanding, you're moving towards achievement. And the achievement part is important. So let's talk about these reactive and creative responses. And let's talk about them as a continuum. So we have people who are perhaps underreacting. They're maybe staying quiet. They're not saying much. They're minimizing empathy because they don't want to get into the drama. Oh, it's not going to be so bad. Let's not talk about it. That's not going on. Da, 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 da. So you see them going into that protect function. They're underplaying the situation. They don't want to maybe necessarily get into the full extent of it because they're trying to minimize their own reaction to it. So they're doing that, and they're also maybe avoiding some of the situations. So we see that happening. We also see them that this is also a strategy that they're probably using to kind of externally control their own activation. So it's like telling yourself, it's not that bad, it's not that bad, nothing's really happening, it's going to be okay, as a way to manage their own threat response. But the problem with that is that sometimes if we're doing that, we're minimizing the realities of the situation. We won't mention any leaders when we talk about this. Okay. Then we have overreacting, right? So the other extent of it is where people are being controlling, where they're obsessing, where they're finding themselves, okay, I have to read all the news and I have to share all the facts and what do I, so we see that on the other end of the scale, where people they're dealing with their own uncertainty by trying to control the external environment. And that, again, is more of a reactive response. And so it tells us, both of these responses tell us that there's more of that amygdala hijack going on. There's more of that occurring, and people are struggling with their own emotional activation. So we want to kind of play it somewhere in the middle. When you're in that creative state, you're doing things like your hand and amygdala washing, you're kind of recognizing what's going on, but this is really important. Your ability to read the situation and stay attuned means you have to get out of your head in the threat response. You have to actually be in the present of what's happening, rather than telling yourself either frightening stories on the one hand or trying to minimize what's going on the other, right? And so this idea of presence is about that adaptive response. It's about being clear. Where's our vision? Where do we need to be going? Where do we need to be dealing with this? And how am I going to move people through this? And being present to the realities of what you're in. So, any comments, Renee or Sharon, did you want to add anything to that before I ask the question, actually?
I'm good. I'm manning the chat over here, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm just, yeah, no, I think it's great. I think,
Okay.
yeah, no, I think you explained what we were, I think
Anything from the chat that's relevant that you want to bring in?
We talk about, sorry, I was also reading the chat too, I got a bit distracted, but back into the complying piece, to, you know, that we're talking about when we were designing this this call, we were talking about, and I was sort of having awareness where we think sort of comply looks like, oh, I'm going to be quiet, sort of under reacting, but we can have like an over, when we have those over compliers, like I got to get everything done and I got to follow the rules and I got to do the thing. And so that also can be on that sort of almost overreacting, but it looks like it could be underreacting. So it's kind of just notice where that might show up for yourself, or where you show up with where you notice some of your colleagues are like over analyzing everything. So they got to make sure that they follow the rules, that they don't make mistakes.
Right. So it might look like some of providers, for example, I had a physician that I was coaching around this who was feeling like, okay, I have capacity, so I'm going to go in and help other people, providing, let's say, some feeding care for some of the palliative patients because the nurses are overwhelmed. And there's nothing wrong with chipping in and supporting, but it's really being aware of when you start getting into that hero thing of like, I'm going to take on so much that you then start burning yourself out. Right? Because you're feeling like, oh my gosh, there's all these people and I've got to try to help in whatever way I can. And you start overextending yourself in a way that actually might compromise your ability to stay in that adaptive. So one of the things we're going to encourage you to do is just to keep in mind how important it is for there to be clear, effective leadership. That is your job. Your job is to be clear and effective in your leadership and show up with the kind of brain that is going to be effective at leading people through this crisis. That is going to increase resilience and decrease burnout. As Dale, who's on the call today, was talking about, she uses the example, one of our colleagues, Dale McMurtry, talks about it's going to be a sprint and a marathon. So you need to be playing the long game here for yourselves as well in that sprint. Okay, so what are some of the adaptive responses? We want to hear from you about what are some of the adaptive responses that you are engaged in, that you are doing, and that you're seeing others doing. Let's chat a little bit about that. What are some of the adaptive responses? And you can speak it too if you'd rather, chat or speak.
So I want to pull one from the chat a while back. Nicole said her team sort of reminding her to take that walk around the block, as well as her reminding the team to take a walk around the block. So sounds like we've got teams supporting one another, which is a great strategy.
Yeah, usually it's not me doing that to them, but it's usually at the beginning of a meeting coming out of another one and carrying in the baggage from the one I just left, right, and coming in with that energy. So it's helpful to have a team that can provide that feedback as well, to kind of know that you need to kind of eject and have a redo coming back in again. That I think is helpful. But I would just say one of the struggles is right now there's a big shift in the environment where we are shifting to a command and control, and that's not a natural state for many, maybe for some, but it's happening kind of all around us. So just responding as the person or people between these worlds, where there's all this change happening. That's not, it's trying to be adaptive, I think, and trying to empathize and recognize and definitely label it and try and have those redos where possible. It's just the environment is truly chaotic, and the response is definitely shifting to command and control like I've never seen in healthcare.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's something to look at in the CNAFN framework as well, Nicole, because that to a small degree that is adaptive in a chaotic environment. We do want to act in order to stabilize the environment, and then we can move back into the cultures that we're used to, where there's sort of more release of autonomy. But in a chaotic environment, it is important to act first to stabilize, and then, again, move back into sense and respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, what also on the flip side of that, as also that Nicole's just speaking to, is also on the receiving end. It's one thing for being a leaders to do it, but when you're used to the environment where there is much more collaborative and it being just said, you can't make decisions. We don't know anything until 4 o'clock. So you have to sit there and wait and be told by the external or whatever, waiting to be told what to do. So it's very, that environment is very different when we're used to having a lot more autonomy. So I think it's both doing and the receiving that being adaptive in that and learning how to be in that.
Yeah, and when you're adapting, when you're noticing that change in the environment, and that you do need to act first, and seek the collaboration, afterwards when things are a little bit more settled. I think what's adaptive there is to really signal that the environment has changed, and that there will be a return. So people know that the context has changed, right? But bringing that back to explicit, I think, is really important, and we'll get to that in the communication strategies as well. Yeah. We got a lot of things coming in here in the chat. Let's see. Adaptive strategies, bonding. There seems to be a lot of bonding, a lot of relationship. The team is more together despite the challenges. Rachel says she's seeing a lot of empathy for teammates. So there's lots of things that are going really well here.
I love Joe. We were planning for a distant survival party.
Survival party, yeah.
And the other one that I think is really important that we're seeing too in healthcare, there's so much of that perfectionism and shame around error. And that is starting to loosen because people just can't hold on to that level of control. So this is a way to liberate ourselves a little bit from that perfectionism, right? And just recognizing, I think that's part of where the relatedness comes in. We're in this together. We're making our best decisions. It's a really, it's an important piece to start to emphasize that and to really help people to feel a sense of unity and support around what we're going through and that we're doing our best, right? So I think that's an important piece.
Can I have a comment around, because I witnessed a bit of this today where it was actually on a RAM call, and somebody who, they typically lead those calls by just opening up the floor to say, okay, what's going on that's good and what are your challenges? And they did it that way, but there were more times than I'd ever witnessed before where Mel, the doctor who leads the RAM work out of Medify, basically said, this is not a time to be cutting back on services for people who have addiction. If anything, it's a time to step up because we don't have the same access to bars and restaurants. We don't have the same access to the LCBO. And I'd never really heard him kind of say things like that before, but he encircled it with the why, right? So he was a little bit more authoritative than I had heard him be in the past. And I don't want to give the wrong impression. He wasn't bossy about it, but it's just, he never really says a whole lot. He lets everybody else talk. But because he grounded that in because this is a time that people are going to be in need, it landed just fine, right?
Yeah.
People.
Yeah.
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 That's a great example, Amber, when we move into kind of the next thing, as you remember with choose your focus, right? So what you're describing there is somebody who's grounded in the why. We want you to bring your why through this. What's your why as leaders as you go in tomorrow? And your why may not be the huge, you might not be thinking about a huge transformation. Your why might just be, how do I get people through this in a way that's effective? Or your why might be quite shortened to, how am I going to get through the day? And how am I going to support people in the day? And how do I want to show up as a leader? But it becomes important to anchor to that, because to that point, everyone's thinking becomes very concrete when there's drama present, when there's more emotion, right? We've talked about this many, many times. So people's focus goes into immediacy, concrete, the problem, and what's the thing I need to do that's right in front of me. And so you're going to have to tailor your thinking and your communication to that. That's where it sounds more directive, because people are really at this point, really looking for much more concrete steps and strategies. So that feels like it's much more directive than asking points of view. What should we do? It's a lot less reflective than maybe communication you were having before. But the reason for that is that we are adjusting to the reality of where people's brains are at. Okay, so I think it's important for you to be able to go in and have that clarity about, what's my why today? What do I want to, by the end of the day, think about your intention and outcome. I want to be feeling like this so that I come home and I'm not, feeling totally spent at the end of the day, but that I can think of, let's say, a few things that I've done and that my colleagues have done that I feel proud of, or I feel are adaptive. So it's back to managing your own thinking. Okay, so adaptive strategy number 2 that we wanted to talk about is normalizing your anxiety with presence, normalizing your anxiety, normalizing other people's anxiety. So really labeling this as the stress response is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, right? And so the adaptive response is to be present to others' experience, but not to get caught up in their emotion. And that's hard for all of you who are very sensitive, empathic, sensing into it. It catches on like a bit of wildfire. So Sharon, did you want to say a little bit more about this ninja move?
Yeah, I think the normalizing, oh, am I on? No, I did unmute, good.
Yeah.
The normalizing is about letting people know, how normal it is to be in reaction to this. And I think what we tend to do is sort of understand cognitively, but very often it's hard for people to feel that you really get them when you're just saying, yes, it's okay, it's normal, don't worry, you're fine. You need to sort of pause, slow down, be really present with them, maybe ask them, do a little bit of clearing the space with them, ask them to label what they're feeling, ask them to tell you about that feeling and what it's creating for them. Just let them talk about it a little bit. And I think we're almost afraid to do that, thinking the floodgates are going to open and nothing's going to, everything's going to melt down. But I think that there is good evidence to show that labeling and talking about the emotion, naming it, is something that helps people move it aside anyway. And if we can just take those few extra seconds to really be present with that for ourselves, for our colleagues, for the frontline people you run into in the moment, in the course of the day, that can really help to sort of just say that what you're feeling is okay, and I'm here to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing that's very that helps with resiliency is people actually, because of the heightened anxiety, they want to do something. People focusing on work right now is actually very protective, but they have to feel like they're helping them to see how they're directing that is really important, that they feel a sense of success or something in what they're doing. So helping with the reframe. So people may say to you, you know what, I feel really helpless. I get that. let's talk about what you did that actually was really helpful. So it's, again, you're hearing it, you're seeing with what they're bringing, you're being present to it. So you're not trying to push it away. You're helping them label, but you're also, when the timing is right, helping them to refocus. And a lot of you are talking about how you're doing this in meetings, by clearing the space, by starting with a check-in. The thing that we want to do is just to make sure that when we get into a group, we don't get too much amplifying of the drama, right? Because that will heighten that amygdala threat response. So that's why putting some containment around it can be really helpful. We're going to label it. Let's just do it in a word. Can we do it in a chat? But then focusing people back on things that help them feel in control. So again, we're kind of looking at how can we help people with their sense of certainty. And so we're going to go into some strategies specifically about that. So help people cope. We've got a little acronym for you. Cope by increasing certainty. The C for cope is concrete. Be concrete as possible in your communication. Right? So thinking about how can we be concrete? How can we be very concrete about something in the here and now, about a task, about what's happening, meeting people where they're at in their thinking. To your point, Amber, some people might not need it to be as concrete, but it's always a good place to start. And then if the person is asking questions or they're bringing out from there, take the conversation there. But for some people, they just want the concrete, tell me what I need to do. They want to move through that. So it's always a good place to start and then see what the capacity is for further conversation. The O is often. As we know, communicating often and well. Well, in this case, is about simple communication, okay? Simple words, concrete words, using fewer words, trying to be very clear in your own mind, where are you directing people, okay? So communicate often and well. Predictable communication. This is an important one. So predictable is also about make your communication predictable. We're going to meet, some of you talked about that already. Every day at 4:30, we're going to have a debrief and I'm going to tell you everything I know. Or we're going to meet at this time, or it's going to be whatever. So people will at least say, my leader is telling me this is the time, that's something I can count on. Your ability to be reliable becomes extremely important in this environment. So it's not about knowing everything. It's actually about being predictable to your people, telling them what you know, what you don't know, but when you're going to tell them. So give them as much certainty as possible where they say, you know what, you know, Rachel or Joe or Jen always says that they're going to be, that we're going to check in at this time, and they do. And that really helps me because it's something that I can predict in this environment, right? And then finally, the E is for explicit. This is a really important one where often our communication, when things are going fast and our thinking is going fast and we're already activated, we make a lot of assumptions. I've been guilty of this in the last week, and I feel like people are with me. Why are they not with me? Why aren't they in my head? I think I already communicated this, because everything's going so fast. So even when you think something is assumed, so it might feel a little bit like, oh, am I like really kind of being, you know, too much about this or too detailed, or are people going to think I'm talking down to them because I'm being so explicit? First, I want you to do this, and then I asked you to do this, or then we're going to do this. It's about being very explicit and not leaving things to assumptions. Checking in. Are you clear with that? Is there a piece that's unclear? So really slowing down and being very explicit in the communication. Again, back to what we know about the brain, our threat response limits how information comes in. Okay, so you may have said it 30 times, but people may be in varying degrees of absorbing that information. So this requires a great deal of presence and focus for you as a leader, because you feel the need to, like, let's move on, let's get this dealt with. I'm going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, these are the issues. So it becomes very challenging to go slow and bring your presence to things. But that is actually what you're going to go slow to go fast in this situation. Okay. So keeping yourself in that adaptive space is important. And finally, we might get into this in future webinars, but obviously what underscores all of this is your ability to keep yourself healthy, to keep your cortisol levels in check, to keep your hijack response in check. If you're not sleeping, if you're not eating all day, if you're running around, you're not exercising, you know, those kinds of things will only amplify your own threat response and make it harder for you to do these things. So that's part of the credibility of walking the talk and being able to do what you can do to kind of manage that, right? So that's an important part. And I know most of you feel like, how am I going to find the time to do that? But we're going to really encourage you to discipline yourself to find some time, even if that's getting up in the morning and not checking your phone first thing. You know, when you roll over in the bed and you check your phone, what's going on? That's activating your reactive response. Take a minute, do your breathing, choose your focus for the day. You know, even if it takes 2 minutes, try to use that kind of discipline to really be mindful of where your thinking is going. Okay, so let's open it up to questions, responses. There's tons of stuff going on in the chat. We just wanted to make sure that we got through some of the content, but we're here to have discussions with you. If anybody has to go, we totally understand. And we'd love to hear in the chat what you took from today. And also if you have any other ideas about what you'd like us to cover to support you. But otherwise, let's open it up and have some discussion about what's an idea from today that you really would like to try to implement. One thing. We're just going to keep it really, really small. What's one thing you heard from today that you want to try to implement yourself from the strategies that we discussed?
I think for me, it's around, I have a meeting every day at 9:30 to check in. And I like to open with a round table for something light. So whether it's what emoji are we feeling today, or what self-care strategy that we're using. And I think the information from this session around how if we're not taking care of ourselves and doing those check-ins as people that have feelings and acknowledgement of those feelings, then we're never going to be able to get to the actual action and tasks. We have to have that safe space to really demonstrate care for people. And even though it might take 10 or 15 minutes, I think it's really critical to do that. And I get more out of that part of the meeting than I do with the actions or the tasks.
Yeah, excellent. That's amazing, Chris. And that's really what we're pointing to, because what we're trying to do now is inoculate people against the burnout, right? Against the hitting the wall. The capacity of our system we know is going to be tested. So the more you as a leader can bring people into presence and focus, a lot of where the burnout comes from is not in the tasks that they're doing, it's in the thoughts that they're thinking. It's in the threat response and the cortisol levels and everything else that is going haywire. And so I think that is what we're trying to inoculate people against, right? We're trying to inoculate them from that burnout of, if everybody had been doing meditation for 10 years and they could just come in and be present and say, what do I have to deal with now? What do I have to deal with now? And they could clear their head from all of that, our capacity to deal with this would be immense. But we haven't all been doing that, and we're in varying degrees of doing that. So your ability to lead people in that and hold a space for that is extremely protective. And so you have to do that work yourself. Don't get sucked in to the urgent. Yes, you have many urgent things to deal with, but I think it's really, really important to remind yourself of that.
Penny, can you put the slide cope back on just as we're wrapping up, just because people are asking questions and they're also wanting to use that tool? That seems to be a lot of feedback, just so people can look at it again and take notes. Thanks.
Cope. So concrete, often, predictable, explicit.
Great.
Any questions about that? Oh, sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
For family members. I'm sure everybody's being tapped as the local expert by all their family members in this time. So this might be a good tool for you guys to use for that. You know, we're gonna send out one e-blast to the whole, you know, family and extended friends and stuff like that. I'll tell you when with any new updates. Otherwise, you know, watch these videos. They're right.
Yeah.
You know, I know I had a friend send to me today just a little, you know, here's how to know if you've got it, and here's how to know if you don't video, which was, you know, you can hear a little tickle in my throat. Everybody who has a little cold or a sniffle right now is feeling anxious. So it was really helpful to have something concrete to look at to really sort of check off in those times.
That's right. That's what people are asking about, really concrete things. And actually, interestingly that you bring that up, Sharon, the World Health Organization did some research before looking at people's, where people are, how they're relating to information. I think because of what's happened in our systems and our institutions, people actually feel like their employers, or because you're in the health system, you are the credible sources, right? Which is a great opportunity for that influence. So instead of thinking like, oh my God, I have to be that person, think about your role in building that sense of trust and influence and saying, well, you know, these are the sources we use. It's back to correcting misinformation. So you can be a really, a leader in that way to direct people in the right way to what to pay attention to. So they're not getting their information from Twitter, you know?
Or if they are, they're at least getting them from a reputable Twitter source.
Yes, I should say that. I didn't mean to diss Twitter.
I have a question. I actually have, and this is something I've been kind of struggling with for a while, like even before all of COVID, and I just find it's amplified right now. One of my team members expressed that they, my team is performance and accountability. And one of my team members is convinced that we're not going to be measuring performance or something along those lines in the future, which I've tried to dissuade him of, but no matter. Today he said, you know, I don't even know what I'm doing, like why I'm here. I'm not making a difference. I'm, you know, like he feels that his role isn't actively impacting the current situation. And I've told him to, you know, that there are going to be opportunities for all of us to get involved and for all of us to work in different ways. It's still fluid. We need to just be patient while we figure these things out. So I've given him some tasks to do in the meantime, but to kind of focus his vision a little bit more. But I understand where he's coming from. Like the people who aren't involved directly in frontline care or in the frontline planning seem to feel this sense of disconnect, where they feel like they're not doing everything they could. But they don't know what they could be doing. So how do I get my team to focus on the things that they can do right now until there are concrete opportunities for them to help in the actual response?
That's great. So what you're talking about there, Erin, is about, again, back to that sense of relevancy. When people are anxious, they want to feel like they're contributing. And because of the situation and everything moving to the front lines, people who are maybe in more of a support or decision role or some of those other things are feeling a little less able to contribute. So I think it's thinking through what supports could be available, what could you do from that position that is relevant, even if that becomes more of a a volunteer community thing. Is there something else you could be doing to help that might be completely out of what the normal job requirements are, but that you think would be an important service? So it's back to being of use. And so when you gave this fellow some concrete strategies, what were you thinking of? What did you do? How did you help him refocus?
Well, he works a lot with databases, and so I apologize. People now on our call know exactly who it is, but he works a lot with databases, and he had some plans for what he wanted to do to improve the current system. And so, you know, I indicated that this was a good time until, you know, to use the time that we're not doing any active monitoring to build that, so that when crisis is starting to wind down, or when it's over, or even, you know, later on during this crisis, if we need to access that information quickly, we have the ability to do it, and we don't have to build it from scratch that time. So I think it helped, but he tends to kind of back up and question his value every once in a while. So I hope that it worked, but we'll see in a couple of days if he's back to this way.
And that might be a situation. I mean, I might be inclined to sort of look at, how do you get him more focused? Some of it is that he might need more focus, and it's to say, look, you are valuable. We don't have the luxury of that right now. I need you to focus on this, and this is what I want you to produce. So that's where moving into that boss might be a little more helpful, to say, I want to see this by this time. The faster we can do this, the better we can get the data. This is going to help in this way. Tie it together for him. Because what I'm hearing is that he's dithering because he doesn't know where to focus. And so he might be a little bit in that overwhelmed kind of, or maybe protective space where it's like, I don't know, and he's spinning. So is there a way, Erin, to be more concrete with him about, this is the why, we need this information, it would be really helpful, we may not need it today, but we might be needing it in a month, we might be needing it in 3 months, so let's start, you know, directing this in this way, and I want to see, so help him come up with concrete deliverables that you want to see around that to keep his focus.
Yeah, I think that would work great. Thank you, Penny. I think that's a perfect solution.
So go back to the COPE. How does that work? Stitch it together for me, Erin, with COPE.
So giving him with the concrete, give him the exacts in terms of, this is what we need, this is when I need it by. You know, while it may not be an immediate thing, here are the specifics as to why it will be useful and beneficial. And then with him, because I'm checking in with my team on a regular basis, checking in with him specifically about how the progress is going, and giving him any insights if there are certain things that he should be building in, bringing that to him right away, and letting him build those things in. Predictable. He knows that every day at a certain time I'm going to be checking in. And then explicit, I think that might be part of where I've been maybe falling a little bit, is that I think I assume that he understands when I say that this is important and this is what, you know, I think I've gone far enough to make it clear.
Yep. So really being explicit with him, he might need more direction from you that you're not used to giving him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Try that strategy out. Okay, excellent. Just so people are sort of starting to sign off, which it's been a long day, and I totally respect that. I think, you know, people have to transition into their home lives. We want to make sure you're getting good sleep. So if you do have some emotion in the space, coming up with a little bit of a, how am I going to unplug, writing down any emotions in the space, putting them in an envelope, sealing them somewhere, away from your bedroom, far away from your bed, preferably at the office before you leave, but really thinking about getting that emotional distance so that you're able to kind of regroup on that. I'm happy to stay on and have a few more questions or any coaching that you may need. We would also appreciate, or we're going to send out a link to this, and if you want to share it or review it or whatever, we're going to have that available for you to share with other people. And we would really like feedback from all of you about what else we could do that would be helpful. If we do, you know, once a week for the next 4 weeks, we have some ideas about kind of a mindfulness-based exercise, some other things we could throw in there. But if there's something that that you think is particularly helpful, we can certainly go into strategies for autonomy, strategies to increase relatedness, virtual working. There's a lot of things we can support you with. So let us know what would be most helpful for you. Okay, anybody else?
Okay, since no
Thanks,
one's going, I will.
Amber, Brittany, thank you, both of you. You
Yes.
feel like you're signing off over here on the chat room, so thanks very
Oh,
much for being
Bye,
here.
Ellen.
Good. Someone else was speaking. Who was that?
It was Nicole.
Oh, hi, Nicole. Go ahead.
Hi. So, this was really helpful. So thanks, you guys. I think particularly around the, in the environment we're in right now, the communication is sometimes coming in the morning as X, and it's completely something, the decision, the communication, the action or no action could be the complete polar opposite by, say, 2. And so I think it is, I really like the COPE and the way that you've pulled that together. It's meeting chaos right now, where there's like, we're going into command and control, we're in crisis mode. And so meetings are appearing and they're shifting and they're rolling over into the next one. And then it's just about the capacity, carving out the capacity to be predictable. I find my greatest time for reaching out to people to have like a reasonable conversation is, when they're done for the day. So when I'm on my way home and people are done for the day, because that's the only time that I feel, and that's not a good thing. It's just kind of being responsive to the environment that's being imposed. And that's not happening at all levels, and it's not happening with everyone right now. So it's just it's a bit about just, I think I will try and definitely use that and try and be as predictable as possible. My predictability right now comes after like 7:30 p.m. That's the only problem.
Yeah. Well, and back to what we know about the complexity, right? It's things are not linear. And in looking for that certainty in making the decision, it's back to chasing the linearity. So people chase the linearity, they chase the data, they chase the information. Part of it is actually letting that go. It's like surfing that big wave of uncertainty. Okay, this is what we're deciding now, let's do it. And back to recognizing people's willingness to step in and try that rather than get to a result. This is the hard part. People want to get to the result. Okay, we did the thing, is it better now? No, it's not better now. It's not going to be better for a while. We have to let that go. What we could do is show up, and that's why the focus on your, I've seen a lot of stuff going around about this that I find really powerful. It's about your commitment and your performance, not your results. That's why separating it from the results is really important right now. Mm-hmm. We're not going to see necessarily results on this. And we can't measure how well we're doing by results. We have to measure it by our commitment and our performance.
That's actually really helpful, because the amount of time you feel like, and being a lead in a particular area, you just feel like, oh my God, am I wasting people's time today? Because we're going to do all this stuff and it's going to change by next week, or it's going to change by end of day. So I really like that, focusing that on the journey. And like you said, on the commitment, the participation, like the involvement, and going through the process versus getting to the perfect end result, and helping to be adaptable around that.
That's right.
And,
so
go
ahead, Renee.
I was just going to say, sorry, Renee, I was just going to say, and to add to that, what you're also speaking into, in my experience in this as well, is the futility in that. So it's like, what's the point? Because we're going to, you put all the work into it, and then 2 hours later, it's all different, and you have to start over again. So I think by focusing on the commitment, performance, and my also experience is back to the relatedness, and the relationships. Like, that's the part that if you can really focus mainly on that consistency and how you treat yourself and others, and it sounds whatever it sounds like, but that's what stays the same, are the people that you work with. And everything else around that, it changes. And that's your stability point. So I think that really, really helps to really manage that futility space that a lot of us feel, especially after a long day and a long night. And then you come back in and then you have to undo and redo what you did before. So I think that really speaks to that. I just want to mention that. Thank you.
If it helps, like, I think, Nicole, I've witnessed you doing some of that, like, thanks so much for the hard work. Like, you've thanked people for their commitment and their performance. And even though that thing might not go out the way we thought it was going to, or when, it doesn't mean people weren't committed and didn't perform excellent in the space. They still have that, right?
That's right.
The measure, I love that piece around, it's not about the result right now, because the target for the results all over the place. So you can't really track to that, right?
This is what transformation feels like.
Yeah.
This is what transformation feels like. It's like squeezing all of you through a little keyhole. This is what it feels like, and you're in it. And so all you can do is really focus on, you know, the wheels are flying off. Really focus on, what did I do today to do the best that I could do? Was I the best leader that I could be by managing my focus, by behaving in this way, your performance, your commitment? And similarly, how do I help everyone else focus on that?
You know, and am I off mute?
Yep.
No, I was just going to say, like, the one thing it has, and people have talked about it already, you know, Nicole, when this all first happened, it was like, you know, you need to work as a West region, and, you know, and really was really enforcing that. And the COVID situation has just really drove that home. And when things are happening so quickly, we're now like reaching out to people. Like, I was trying to find out answers to something that, you know, wasn't my portfolio. I'm like texting Amber, hey man, can you jump on a call? But being forced to reach out of your comfort zone sometimes. And I think it's been a great thing, because I think we're all feeling the same way.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So coming back to the meaning of it is doing our best together. Like, that's where you're at. That's the meaning here. That's life. Right? You're in the journey of life. Things come together and things fall apart. And so that's the core that you're bringing everyone else back to. Excellent. Okay, good. Any last comments before we end off?
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's great. If you have any other suggestions, if you want to talk about some of that more or whatever, we'll be designing some other topics and having another virtual support community. You guys rock, and you are leading this transformation, and we want to support you in doing that. So it's amazing.
Yeah. So reach out, ping your coaches if you need to, you know, call, shout. If you have a brainwave idea and you think of something that would be useful, just let us know anytime.
Text,
Yep.
whatever, send your owl, whatever works. Harry Potter land.
Okay, and everybody take good care. We want you to just leave everything behind and go and have a nice nurturing time at home. Mm-hmm. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself, to be with your family, or to be on your own, or be in the bath, or whatever it is you need. Have a good sleep tonight, and back at what you need to deal with being the leader you want to be tomorrow.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for all your hard work, everybody. It's great.
Okay. Good night.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.